I'm Rachel Greaves, author and illustrator of a new series of children's stories about Ruffle, an Airedale Terrier, and his adventures on a steam railway. The latest story in the series is called Ruffle and the First Train, and it was written especially to commemorate the centenary of the ending of World War I. We forget that when we visit these heritage railways, they were actually working railways over 100 years ago, carrying our soldiers off to war and bringing them back, far fewer and many injured. Ruffle and the First Train is intended a discussion point, especially for under 10s. After all, if we're going to remember the sacrifice of these brave people, it's our younger generations we must look to. Hopefully Ruffle and the First Train will begin that interest. Ruffle and the First Train. It was early on a cold autumn morning when Ruffle trotted along towards the little station on the Heritage Railway. Ruffle often visited the station to see the people who worked there, especially Eric, the old white-haired station master who always looked forward to Ruffle's visits. But this morning seemed different. Ruffle sensed a quiet stillness in the air. It wasn't just the chilly coldness, there was something else. As he passed the station, a little bell sounded inside behind the closed door. A train was about to arrive. Ruffle jumped onto one of the green platform benches and sat down patiently. Very soon he saw a train coming round the bend in the distance. It wasn't the usual green engine, but a black one, pulling two coaches along behind. As the engine rumbled to a halt alongside the platform, Ruffle looked eagerly into the driver's cab. But Ruffle didn't recognise the driver. It wasn't Ben, who was the driver of the green train. Ruffle sat and watched as the carriage doors opened and a group of 10 men climbed slowly out and onto the platform. They were all dressed exactly the same in brown uniforms. Ruffle began to wag his tail at such a crowd on the small platform, but none of the men seemed to take any notice of him. A tall man was guided to the bench where Ruffle was sitting. Another man in uniform helped him to sit down at the opposite end to Ruffle. "There you go. You sit there whilst we sort the bags." The tall man took off a knapsack from around his neck and settled down. His friend joined the others who were busy passing large canvas bags from the train onto the platform. Once the last bag had been passed out, the carriage doors were closed and the train began to pull slowly away from the station. Ruffle watched as a group of men managed to pick up and carry all of the bags, either on their shoulders, across their backs or in their arms. They then made their way past the station building and across the track towards the village. "Hello! Hello!" Ruffle jumped as the tall man's voice rang out loudly from where he still sat on the bench. "Lads, where are you? Is anybody there?" The man sat very still, his head slightly to one side as he listened for a reply. Ruffle looked across at him and noticed that he was different to the others. Across his eyes he had a thick bandage, a bit grubby in places. Black spiky hair poked out from the top of the bandage. He was a young man, yet his face seemed old and weary. The man turned, his face looking to where Ruffle was sitting. "You're there, aren't you?" he said quietly. "I can sense you're there. Here, come on, come and say hello." The man held out a hand in Ruffle's direction. As Ruffle stood up on the bench and strained his head towards the man, his nose and beard touched the man's outstretched fingers. "I knew you were there all the time. Good dog. Let me feel you. What sort of dog are you?" He ran his fingers gently over Ruffle's head and along his face, down towards his mouth. "That's a fine wet beard you have there, boy. Are you an Airedale? I wonder." He patted Ruffle, who sat down again, this time next to the man. Ruffle began to sniff the man's clothes. They smelt strange, a musty old smell, mixed with mud and other scents that Ruffle hadn't come across before. The man continued to stroke Ruffle's large hairy head, and his fingers felt round Ruffle's red collar to his name tag. Ruffle's name had been etched deeply into the metal tag, so the man could trace the letters with the tips of his fingers. R-U-F-F-L-E. Ruffle! That's a grand name. I bet you're a handsome chap and no mistake. The man could feel Ruffle's beard tickle as Ruffle licked his fingers. "There are a few dogs where I've been," he continued. "Brave, brave dogs. They carried messages for us. You wouldn't have liked it. Ear-splitting loud noises, bright flashes of light and mud that would have got between your toes and in your hair. At least I'm home now, though I think they have forgotten me already." Ruffle bent his head and sniffed at the worn light brown canvas bag that rested on the man's lap. The man felt Ruffle's movement and laughed. "What have you found?" "You're right. There just might be a biscuit in my knapsack. There's nothing wrong with your nose, is there, boy? Get your head out of the way then and I'll have a look." He felt for his bag and then the buckle. His fingers worked quickly to undo the fastening, then searched inside the bag. "There you go," he said, pulling a small dry biscuit from the bottom of the bag. "I was saving it. Obviously knew I would be meeting you. Here you go." He held the biscuit towards Ruffle, who took it very gently. The man smiled as Ruffle quickly ate it, the sound of crunching echoing in the morning air. "Eric!" The shout, piercing the stillness, made them both jump. Ruffle jumped down from the bench, recognising the familiar sound of the name. Looking round to where the voice had come from, Ruffle saw one of the group of uniformed men who had walked away come running towards them. "Eric! There you are!" The uniformed man ran past Ruffle and up to the bench. "You forgot me, Tommy," replied the man on the bench, shaking his head. "Of course we didn't, Eric. We would never forget you. Come on, they're waiting for you." He bent to help Eric to his feet. "Wait," said Eric, turning round. "I just need to say goodbye to the dog. Can you see where he's gone?" Ruffle wagged his tail as Tommy looked round the platform. He shook his head. "There's no dog here, Eric. What are you on about? Come on, let's get you home." But he was sitting there next to me, on the bench," cried Eric. Tommy shook his head, forgetting that Eric couldn't see him. "You're mistaken, mate. Come on, you're tired. You need to rest now." Putting Eric's arm over his shoulder, Tommy guided Eric carefully along the platform. Ruffle stood and watched as they walked slowly across the track and disappeared down the lane towards the village. He sniffed the air. A breeze was now gently blowing across the platform. Ruffle turned and jumped up again onto the bench. He sat down again, unsure about what he should do next. He hadn't been there long when he heard the sound of the little bell ringing again from within the station hut. The door opened and a white-haired man dressed in his usual blue overalls came out. Ruffle wagged his tail as his friend, the station master, came towards him. "I see you trying out the new bench then, Ruffle," said Eric. He took a cloth from his overall pocket and reached over Ruffle to gently wipe a small bronze nameplate that ran along the top rail of the bench. "I had it installed in honour of my great-great-grandfather who fought in the First World War. I was named after him, you know. He had a special way with dogs, always had a biscuit for them. He would have loved you, Ruffle," said Eric, as he gently stroked Ruffle's head and ears. "He was blinded by a gas attack, lost his sight. It's just a token, but hopefully the bench and nameplate will ensure people won't forget him or the thousands like him." A distant whistle made Eric and Ruffle look towards the bend in the track, where a green engine was winding its way towards the station, followed by a string of carriages. "Come on then, Ruffle. Jump down and help me meet the first train of the day." Eric turned and started to walk along the platform. Ruffle paused for a moment, then jumped down and walked over to sit beside Eric. He nuzzled Eric's fingers with his nose and beard. "No, Eric, this wasn't the first train of the day."